bit anxious. No, she last week she asked for a lift and then this morning she says apologies.
I'll check that tomorrow, thank you very much.
No.
Test. Okay, yeah, you can do that. Cool. So there are actually 9 people watching right now.
Wow. We all sat in the room.
Okay, so it has gone 7 PM, so we'll start the meeting. I will just inform everyone that this meeting is being filmed and live streamed. Remember.
There's a seat here. No, we want to film this growing.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, John can do it.
Yeah, John can do it. Don't feel the need to be sick. Sorry, I know you didn't hear me clarify. I'm on this side. Thank you very much.
So can I welcome members and anybody watching from home. So the first item of the agenda is apologies for absence. Can we receive it?
Yeah, Ken Hartley and Lindsay Gaskell.
Thank you. Item 2, declaration of interests. Does anyone have any prejudicial pecuniary interest to declare? Nope. Okay. Item 3, open forum. We did receive a question. As Barnoldswick is getting busier with parked vehicles, what are the council planning to do for making pedestrian and disabled access better? Councillor Whipp.
Thank you, Chairman. As members of the council will know, the town council is investing together with Pendle Council in a series of town centre improvements, and that will involve creating better accessibility, particularly for disabled people around the town centre. Beyond that, an item on tonight's agenda is in respect of whether the town council would take over car parks from Pendle Council. So although the town council at the moment isn't responsible for off-street parking, in the future, depending on that decision, it might well be, and in which case there'd be some responsibility for the town council to provide better facilities insofar as they can do. I hope that satisfies whoever's asked that question online.
Scott Johnson.
Very good. But we're more than happy to have it on an agenda for a general purposes committee, and we could consider the issue further at the meeting in February.
Okay, thank you. We received no further questions, so I will move on now to the minutes of the last meeting. So would anyone like to move them as a correct record? Or indeed point out the mistakes, Chris?
I move.
Okay, we've got a seconder? Okay, all those in favour?
sign each piece of paper twice.
Double sign as well. Yep.
Somebody watching at home will think, "Man, this is what
Item 5, committee/working group reports. We've only got one, the general purposes. Councillor Whipp.
Thank you, Chairman. In moving the minutes of the General Purposes Committee, there are one or two things that I need to pick up as a consequence of the decisions that were made at the meeting, and there'll be decisions for the full council to make on the back of the information. First of all, Mr. Chairman, on the environmental schemes, I'm just looking for it now. On the environmental schemes, there was the issue of the sculpture trail, and we discussed the totem installation, and there was an agreement to look at putting cobbles around the base of the totem sculpture, and we agreed to bring the prices to this meeting so that we could make a decision as to whether to go ahead with that or not. And I think Joe has some further information.
Price of the work is £1,250, which is for, I think, just short of 10 tonnes of cobbles that are about that big. Technical term. Is that right, Luke?
Yes, I think so. Previously, we've got an estimate of about, well, £2,000 to £3,000 for it. Pendle Council very kindly offering to do the work within their maintenance contract, so there's no charge for the work to be undertaken. It's just the supply and delivery of the cobbles. So it is within the budgets that we've got, and it's up to this meeting to decide whether to do it or not.
Sounds like a good idea to me.
Okay, so are you proposing that?
Well, if Kirsty's proposing it.
Okay, Kirsty, you're proposing that we purchase them. Mike, I think. Yeah, okay. All those in favour then? That is unanimous.
And Mr. Chairman, the minute 1944 request for a memorial tree at Letcliffe Park. We need to have a meeting up there, or not a meeting. Some of us need to have a site visit just to see exactly what is being proposed. And speaking to Keith Higson from Pendle's Parks earlier today, the suggested time for that is 2 o'clock on Tuesday the 21st of January. I don't know who can make it, but obviously those who are interested and can make it are very welcome to come along. And Chairman, if you look at the minutes, there's quite a bit of discussion about the works that we could do doing at Letcliffe Park. So there's jet washing the paths, different work, and the idea is to look at all those issues at the same time So we're looking at the proposed memorial tree and anything else that comes on. Matter for information, really.
Okay.
So with that, Chairman, I've moved the minutes, and I think I've covered the items that I need to pick up. Joe will tell me if not.
I know it's not on this, but it's
Yeah.
on GP.
Chairman, on the environmental schemes, the previously, at a previous meeting, there's been a discussion about replacing the crosses on the town green with pole planters, like we have on the other side of the road. And we said we need to get some prices to find out how much they would cost. And the figures that Joe and I have extracted from different people would mean that they're probably about £1,000 a piece, which, given the pressure on the budget, we don't think is affordable at the moment. You know, it's a nice to do, but perhaps it'd be nice to do it next year. The work that does need carrying out is the removal of the existing crosses because of continued corrosion, and part of the budget proposal would pick up that and authorise Joe to get on and get them removed. So there's no action required in terms of.
Thank you, Councillor Whipp. Okay, so the move that needs to be approved is the correct record. Would anyone second those? Thank you, Mike. Item 6 then, finance, to confirm approval of payments made by the town clerk to the council since the last meeting of the council, and to delegate consent for payments to be made prior to the next meeting of the council. So would anyone like to move that we accept the payments made? Thank you, Mike. Anyone like to second that? Kirsty, all those in favour? That's unanimous. Item 7, the 2019-2020 estimated outturn and 2020-2021 budget. Okay, Councillor Whipp.
Thank you, Chairman. Probably the most important item on the agenda, because this sets the budget for the new financial year, and obviously means what we can do, what we can't do. And our clerk, Joe, has worked assiduously over.
Sorry, I wouldn't stress it anymore.
She's worked assiduously to make sure that we get the information that's required and work out what we need to spend in different areas. As the Town Council know, last year we prioritised works on the town centre, the town square and the pavements immediately round about it, and we've been working very hard to try and get a package of funding available so that can go ahead, and that forms a large part of the budget. Come on to that in a bit. The issue with that is we had hoped to have work underway now, but because of putting in a bid for the High Street Heritage funding, that set us back 3 months, and it's not possible to do the work. And given that we've got events such as St George's Day in April, and then the Bands on the Square at the end of May, and the beach at some point during the summer, the general view when we discussed it amongst ourselves was that we should put it back until the middle of August at the earliest, and carry out the work August, September, October, and that for the duration of the work the market will move onto part of the And so the budget has been built around that, and there's an issue that isn't in the paper, which I just need to flag up as a cost that we'll have to find within the budget, but we should be able to accommodate that. So, turning to the budget overall, the proposal that's on the papers in front of people, and I will read it out because if people are watching on the webcast, it won't mean anything if we don't actually go through it. In the current year, we've been saving up for that town centre work. Our contribution is going to be £77,000, which is £75,000 of new money, and then £2,000 that we pledged several years ago, but it's never been used. And so our end of year balances are quite a bit higher than otherwise they would have been, because we've earmarked funding and we're going to be carrying it over at the year end. So the first part of our resolution is to note that the estimated outturn and year end balance is £227,172. During the current year, we have had some exceptional costs to one or two budget heads. One of them, which is quite significant, and the other one less so. But first of all, there's an estimated £5,000 extra spending on the Civic Hall, and that's Joe will give you details, but that's a couple of exceptional replacement items. So I think today one of the link-up boilers gave up the ghost, which is £700?
No, £300.
£300, sorry. And there were repairs to the boiler which had to be carried out, and the gas bills had been a lot higher than they should have been. So there's a need. The estimated expenditure at the end of the year is £25,000, and we've got £20,000 in the budget. The income is also more than we budgeted for, so there is funding coming in that covers the cost, but we do need to put it into the budget. So the second part of our resolution is to via that funding of £5,000, and it's from the unspent salaries to put into that essential equipment repairs and replacement. The less consequential item is that we've had two window panes damaged at bus shelters. It's only £100, but we will be over budget on that one. So the proposal is again to take £100 out of the salary costs that we haven't spent and put them into the bus shelter budget, and that should keep it even Steven. Mentioned in the previous item that we need to remove the old hanging basket poles on the town square. Bit of a finger in the air, but we think £1,000. Discussion with Joe. Joe thinks £1,000 would be adequate to remove the poles, take out the old concrete and make it good. May not be £1,000, could be a bit more, but that resolution would authorise the clerk to get prices and get the work ordered. And then similarly, there's an exceptional cost which we can fund within the budget, which is to repair the defective road surface at the beginning of the access track to the Greenwood Field allotments and Barnoldswick Town Football Club car park. The chairman took a picture there this week, and there are several potholes, and given that we're complaining about Lancashire County Council either not repairing potholes or not repairing potholes adequately, we thought it would be better for us to get that necessary work done to a good standard, and then nobody can be pointing the finger at the town council. There's also some potholes in the Victory Park area, in the driveways, which need dealing with as well, but they would be too expensive. So that part of the resolution is that we approve funding of an estimated £3,000 to repair that road surface, and that comes out of the parks renewals budget, which is where it should come from, but Joe needs authority to get on with that. Resolution number 5 is that the draft budget at Appendix 7B be approved. Chairman, I'm not going to go through this line by line. It's quite long. The figures for anybody that's watching will be posted on the, or indeed they may already be there, on the Town Council website. They will be on the Town Council website as part of the minutes from this meeting. I'm holding up 7B. 7.
No, that's right.
Yeah, I was holding at 7A, 7B. Yeah, thank you. So that's the sheet paper, and that totals, including the £70,000 for the town square improvements, it's £462,600, which is quite a bit of money. I'll come back to that in a moment. The resolution number 6 here, going from the Sublime, is that the allotment rents be increased by £5 across the board, and the chairman can explain what that's all about, but it increases the revenue. So, Chairman, it's a separate vote on the precept to the budget, but I'll go through that now and then I can shut up. So the resolution is that the budget requirement of £462,600 be met as follows. This is where the Town Council gets its income from. So the box bar, the bar that we operate at box, we will get an estimated £50,000 in income. The civic hall, £30,000. The market on the town square, £8,000. Miscellaneous parks income is £3,000. Allotments, which the £5 increase together with the existing rent adds up to £5,000. Donations at events, £5,000. And then the proposal is to use £82,000 from reserves. So the funding that we'd saved up for the town square work will be paid for out of the money that we put by last year, or this financial year, but last financial year, as long as this budget is concerned. And finally, the precept is set at £279,600, and that's about £22,100 more than the current year, but that covers the additional stuff that we've taken on above and beyond all the nice to do stuff. This is to pay for the stuff that, because we've said, right, we'll do this, that and the other, that's the extra expenditure. So the bottom bit is just formally saying that the precept be set at £279,600. So I move, Chairman, and I'll let Joe answer any questions.
I've sort of fledged actually.
Kirsty?
Yeah, you talked about the £75,000 for the town square improvements, but my understanding is we're getting money from elsewhere for that as well. It's not just us funding it.
Yes.
Yes, so it's actually we're putting in money to get more.
Oh yes, absolutely.
I just thought it's worth mentioning and explaining.
Right. We had hoped that we would get some government funding, that the money that we were putting in would trigger a total of £2 million expenditure. Now, that all fell flat on its face because the government didn't approve our bid. In Coleman, they were told that they weren't shovel ready. Now, I'm not sure what excuse they'll give for not approving ours, because you know we had a scheme up and ready to go, and we were intended starting now, so you couldn't be any more shovel ready than that. But that didn't come about. However, the funding that we have got, which is secure, is from Pendle Council, and Joe might have the sheet there with all the details.
And then I'll have it,
But so it's just a tad over £200,000, and we've also got a bid into the county council so that we can do more pavement renewals and perhaps replace the street lights, which the county council say are getting to the end of the life. But that's up in the air. So the money that we're putting in, there's actually the equivalent amount and another £50,000 on top from Pendle Council. And that's solid money, and it's thought that that might attract some council money.
total spend was about 202, wasn't it? Printing it, maybe took it out, so I don't need it. I think it's taking it back out then. No,
Okay.
gone.
So we've got a motion from Councillor Whipp on, first of all, the budget, your resolutions 1 to 6, because they need to be separate votes.
Pass.
I think it's the 7ABC that I need separate things on.
Right, okay.
A is to know the estimated outturn.
Yeah, so you're moving all. So have we got a seconder to note the estimated outturn?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. All those in favour? That is unanimous. So 7B, Councillor Whipp has moved the budget.
Yeah, it's resolved to agree the draft budget is proposed at 462,600.
Okay.
David proposed it, you need a second
Mike
that.
Pearce. All those in favour? That is unanimous. 7C, allotment rents.
What's the increase?
Chris?
£5.
On how much is that?
The current year,
35.
they are paying 35 if they don't have water on site or 43 if they do. So it's still...
Check it wasn't like
It's-
£5 they're paying, we're
And
doing it.
they
No,
haven't.
it's, they had a £5 increase last year. The year before it stayed the same, and the year before that they had a £3 increase.
Yeah.
So it's still, I've done some research, it's still significantly lower than other areas.
Okay. So got a mover and a seconder for the allotment rent increases. So all those in favour, please. That is unanimous.
Chairman, you need to go back to the resolutions about the existing year authorising the clerk to via funding.
Yeah, the exception.
So resolutions 2, 3 and 4.
All right. Okay. I thought I'd done that
You've done
under B, which is all these.
No.
No.
Right, okay.
Okay. We've got a seconder for the 2, 3, 4. Yeah. All those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous.
Chairman, just in respect of the precept, the increase of £22,100, that's roughly equivalent to a typical Barnoldswick Band A property of less than a penny a week. You know, £22,100 is a lot of money. Shared out, it is a very small amount, so it's not like it, you know, I know bit on bit is not nice, but it is only about that penny a week.
I worked it out as less than just under 0.08% increase.
I think it's 7.5.
0.075.
No, 7.5.
7.5% increase.
No, I think it's something like the whole council tax.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
well,
Oh, so
it's
it's
just
for
town
household,
councils.
it's about 7.5%.
yeah.
So I think mine was 70p a month.
Yeah.
I think.
Chairman, I mean, just on the council tax overall, the bulk of the council tax goes to the county council, and their increase is likely to swamp the entirety of the money that the town council gets from the precept. And so of the whole lot, maybe 4p the pound is paid to the town council, but don't hold me to that because it's, you know, it's a moving feast.
I was just meaning of looking at what we charge extra for a precept based on what we got last year, we're probably less than inflation. That's what I was thinking of as a reasonable discussion.
Okay, thank you. So the proposal for precept in 2020 and 2021 is set out, is moved by Councillor David Whipp. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mike Pearce. All those in favour then, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you very much.
Again, we should have a running comment that the chairman of the town council is now signing the precept requisition form. Well, that's not.
It's 2 minutes.
That's 50,000.
No, that or just get rid of it.
Anna, sign this. John, that's also Okay. Item 8 on the agenda is grant applications. So 8A, to consider an application from West Craven Warriors Juniors for £1,000 in order to provide free rugby training to children in Barnoldswick. The funds will be used for safeguarding and coaching courses, first aid kits, etc.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. Okay. So Kirsty, I think are you moving to? Yeah.
I'll second that.
Jodie seconded. Okay. All those in favour? Yeah, that's unanimous. Thank you.
We currently have 40 children attending regularly, and the Christmas party had 70 children, so some go on an ad hoc basis, and they are training more for free.
My son when he was younger, and it was lovely that they do it all for free.
So item 8B, to consider an application from Pendle Triathlon Club for £1,500 for the hire of West Craven Sports Centre for the annual triathlon. Councillor David Whipp.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, the Pendle Triathlon is a great event. It does attract some people to Barnoldswick. Last year, the Town Council agreed to put £750 into the event. and to underwrite a further £750 if the Triathlon Club didn't get other income. I think we were a little bit disappointed that the club came back and called in the underwriting. We're not aware that they went to other parish or town councils in Pendle or indeed in West Craven, which may or may not have helped plug their funding gap, or indeed they didn't generate more income, which they could have done. So it is with some regret that I propose that we don't accede to this request. If they'd just taken £750 last year and come again and said, well, can we have £750 this year, I think I'd have had a different attitude. But I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but I think, last year they took 1 and 8, and so we haven't got an 8 to give them this year. So I move that we decline the request on the basis that they didn't achieve adequate income generation from other sources last year.
I think we should give them money. I think it's a great thing for the town. 150 people taking part. The money's going back into a sports centre in the town, a business in the town. And doesn't it do quite a lot for home technology as well? Sort of promoting them as a business. And I thought it was a really good grant.
Is there any evidence at all that last year they went out and attempted to even get any money on top of the £750 we gave them? That you know of? Anybody know?
No.
Was it them who suggested you underwrite the 750, or did they ask for 1500 and that was the deal?
We suggested they went to the town and parish councils up.
It can be hard to raise money. I think we should pay them. We've underspent on grants.
We won't have it. What else coming?
Okay, Jane.
Can we not get back to them and ask them to put something in for this? Can we not give them like 750? Can we not give them what we did last year, 750, and make some, some partial?
We give them 1500 last year.
Would you like to propose that as an amendment to Councillor Whipp's motion?
I just wonder what everybody else is feeling about it. That's all. We gave them something last year. Yes, they came back for more, but is it something?
Yeah, what if we wait for a compromise?
Can we just let people speak in turn, please? Mike?
Last year, it was £750 on the proposal that they would look for other sources for the extra £750. As we know, they may not have done, but they've come back to us for the extra £750 to cover for the costs. Now they come back for this year for £1,500.
Are they going to do exactly the same again?
Why should we have to give it to them?
You don't have to. We judge the bid, don't we? So I think it's a good one.
But they are, and the people that take part pay for the privilege of taking part in that event. So obviously there's money coming in.
You've shown that here. It's £5,000. They bring in about 3,800. They're asking us for the gap.
There you go.
Yeah, slightly.
Okay, so
Why don't we, like last time, meet it halfway, but be more strong in the suggestion that they do get a match funding process going on, to say that they get hours on the basis that they put some to themselves.
Maybe I was going to suggest a
yes,
compromise. Sorry.
you can turn, indicate if you want to speak.
Oh, right,
So
okay.
we can specify and say that they don't get the 750 up front, say, unless they come to us saying they've already got some other amount. So instead of just doing the whole, we'll give you some but then we'll top it up, we'll say, come to us with so much and we'll make it up to the rest. Then it gives them the chance to secure that in advance.
What did you say? Sorry, John, I missed that bit. I was trying to find the figure.
Well, I haven't really suggested a figure, but I mean, if you wanted to, you could say, make sure that they come to us with £500 secured somewhere else, we could give them 1,000.
Got more than that.
So,
We've got one.
well, if they want to make that, or if they want to present us with that money, but if they want us to make a donation, then
So-
shows that they're putting something to help get the total they want.
Kirsty.
Sorry, I was just going to say, why don't we do the compromise, but let's put a plan together for how we're going to raise it. So
Can
actually,
you say that again, John's talking.
sorry, I was just going to say, why don't we just ask them to say, right, give us a plan of how you're going to raise this gap, and then we'll give you this amount. So actually make them put it in writing as part of the grant. And then they've got to have shown that there's a plan, even if it's quite a simple one, and then we can approve or disapprove on that basis. So compromising that way to say, look, show us what you're thinking of doing to raise some extra funds,
Okay.
rather than just
I
a loose go out and get some money.
We've already got the money.
So,
Yeah, but that's not in here though. You know, that's not what we're judging on, is it?
We asked them last year to specifically go out to the town and parish councils and ask for the money because
It's not
pending
just
triathlon
Barnoldswick.
and there's not one other application been put in according to the...
So you mean like Avery or somewhere?
Yeah, so it
Must-
covers, it's Pendle Triathlon, so it covers Colne and Nelson.
No, but we wouldn't fund something that was Pendle but happened in Colne, would we?
Yeah,
Would we?
yeah.
Okay. Because I haven't seen anything like that.
The triathlon does go through Erie,
Yeah.
so if they're not getting funds from Erie as well, then how is it reasonable to expect Barnoldswick to pay the full amount for the event?
Okay. I was just saying, I thought it was a good bid. The bid that was in front of us, I thought it was a good use of money.
right, Councillor Whipp.
Chairman, you may be getting into some difficulty with that's been moved and that's been suggested and that's been suggested. I could seek to try and get a consensus, but I suspect there's some hard noses in the room that were bitten last year and not prepared to be bitten twice, and there are other people who, on a scale would, move to giving them further funding. I just wanted to point something further out. Presumably, my proposal was the original resolution. I think it was seconded over there, and then Jane proposed an amendment, or she asked about an amendment. She didn't actually formally move it. So, it's clear there's going to be an amendment of some sort, and that needs to be put on the table. The thing that I want to point out is that item 13 on our agenda is about the free swimming initiative. Now, without prejudging the decision on that, what we did last year is that we funded that out of the grant pot. So in the budget figures, we've assumed that the entirety of the grants pot will be utilised. And when it got to that bit, I was going to suggest that we actually use the unspent money to go to the West Craven Sports Centre for the free swimming initiative. So to some extent, if we use the funding for the triathlon, we will have less available for the free swimming initiative.
Okay, well, back to this grant,
3392 is cost.
we have,
Can we not afford all of it? You can't, that was 7, can't we?
No.
we have a motion on the
Can we
table.
not add this up right?
It's been moved, but it hasn't been seconded.
I'll second it.
We'll second that, okay. So, before we take this motion to refuse this grant, would anyone like to propose any amendments?
I'd like
Now, you can't change the substantive action of the motion, so you couldn't say you have an amendment to approve it, but you can. Can you? I suppose, okay. Okay, you can apparently.
I'll propose that we approve it based on the compromise position, where they show us a plan to raise at least some of the funds. So I'll go for the 500.
So,
So we offer them £1,000 on the basis that they show us a plan to raise the 500 from a wider spread of whoever it may be.
so you're offering them £500,
So offer them 1,000,
right?
go for the third, as long as they show us a plan to where they would raise the other 500.
So how would we decide if that plan was sufficient?
Can we delegate that to the clerk?
I suppose we can. If the clerk makes a decision that isn't very representative of the council, she might be in for some flack there, though.
We haven't got £1,000, we've only got 858. If you approve something later in the agenda, so you've got to choose. Help us in budget.
So there's no budget for it, what we're saying.
858.
Right.
I'm sorry, I don't understand that. We've got £7,000 unspent.
We've spent some.
That's next year, isn't that next year?
Oh, no, this is this year, we're still in this year.
Yeah, but where is...
We've,
it says it's
we've already
7,000.
spent.
Football club have had some, and somebody else has. We've already spent 1,750. It's on item 6.
This is in the 2019 budget, right?
Yes. The one that's got all the coloured ones behind it.
Yeah. Just on this, it wasn't on, that's all. Right, yeah, 3,000, okay, right. Sorry,
John,
my mistake.
Sorry, the event's in May, so will that not come out of next year's?
No.
they've applied for it
Is it
now.
applied within this year, it can be this one, okay. Well, in that case, can I add to Kirsty's proposal that we offer them 850 on the basis that they come up with £650 of...
Okay, so that wasn't what Kirsty originally said. So, Kirsty, are you happy to accept that as
Yeah.
a change to your amendment? Okay,
If
so,
we've got 858, let's offer them that.
okay, so the amendment to the motion is that we offer them
Someone's gonna have to vote.
858. Okay, so we're taking the vote on Kirsty's motion now.
Okay.
Okay, so it's moved.
I will second that.
Yeah. Okay, so all those in favour of Kirsty's amendment to the main motion? Sure. No. That's okay.
4 in favour.
And then how many against, please?
6 against.
Okay, so that amendment has failed. We now move back to the main motion, which is to deny the grant. Are there any further amendments? No? Okay, so I'll go to the vote on this. All those in favour of denying the grant application, please show. All those against? 3. And I'm abstaining. So I think that is now, or no, that is now denied. Moving on now to item 9, we have to report the theft of town council property.
One minute, I need to write it down, I'm running behind you. It was discovered on, I think, Switch On, that the Frank Street store had the door broken into, and subsequently it's been identified that the street, you know, the vacuum thing that we have, it's like a wheelie bin, but it's not a wheelie bin, that's been stolen. And then when they went to take some things down at, what were you?
The globes, putting the globes.
When they were putting the globes up, it was identified that the flood container that we own near the tip had also been entered, and 3 generators and 2 dirty water pumps had been stolen. The police are dealing with it.
Okay.
I think we're noting it.
I think, yeah, we're noting this. I don't think it's
We also need
appropriate
to know
list
it needs to
of-
come off the asset register.
Yeah, so Are we all happy with noting that they're coming off the asset register?
No, I'm not happy at all.
No? Oh, well,
We've been
Got that thing,
okay. Item 10, community asset transfer from Pendle Borough Council. So this is to consider requesting transfer of car parks at Rainhall Road, North Avenue, Brook Street, West Close Road and Wormsgate.
Are we just asking for it?
Chairman, what's the cost, the implications to Barnoldswick Town Council?
Councillor Whipp.
Well, Chairman, I don't think we know that, and I think we need to meet with Pendle to understand the implications. I know Pendle Council has a budget for the car parks. What it doesn't have is regular funding for major work, and so, for instance, the Rainbow Road car park, they've just replaced all the floodlights, and that was necessary. I think 8 out of 10 floodlights were out, 8 out of 10 lights, and my understanding is, I'm not privy to the detail, is that replacing those cleared out the Pendle Council budget. I think we need to understand what the such as resurfacing would cost. I have got Pendle engineers to work out some estimates for the Rainbow Road one, which are over £20,000. Now, the advice there is that it won't need doing for another 10 years, but 10 years down the line, the Town Council would have to pick up the tab to those. Similarly, West Coast Road, which has been used recently for a compound for the culvert work, yourself and myself, Chairman, have been pressing Pendle to fund the resurfacing of the lorry park from the culvert job, but I don't think there's sufficient money left in the culvert job to achieve that. So there might be some repair work done, but again, ultimately it's going to need a lot of money spending on it to keep it going. So, Chairman, I think we need to understand what the long-term costs are, as well as the yearly costs. So, you know, electric consumption, wherever they may be, you know, general day-to-day repairs. So my suggestion would be, in answer to Mike's question, is that we seek a meeting and as part of the assessment of the asset transfer, we look at the long-term implications. So you know, we could say, right, well, fair enough. I think the positive thing, Chairman, in favour of transfer is that clearly there are a lot of discussions going on at a high level in respect of creating a unitary authority covering Barnoldswick as well as other places, and if that happens, effectively we'll lose control of the car parks, what happens on the car parks. Would a unitary authority that charges for parking in Blackburn and Burnley, you know, virtually everywhere else, look at Barnoldswick and say, oh, hang on a minute, you don't charge for your car parks. We need to put that right, don't we? And little old Barley could have no power whatsoever to prevent that from happening. So there are some pretty good reasons why we might take them on, even if it does cost more money, but I think we need to understand what those costs are. So that's my suggestion, that we seek a meeting with Pendle to discuss these possible community asset transfers and the things that we've asked for previously, and we request some decent estimates about, you know, 25-year costs, so that we can factor in those lumpy items that only happen once every 20, 25 years.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table. John?
Could I just ask why Wellhouse Road car park's not in on the list for that? Is there a particular reason we left it out?
Where's that?
It's
No, the co-op.
Oh, that is on there. Oh,
Was it called something else?
it's called something else, I think.
Was that the Brooks
No, I
Street?
think.
no, it's missing off the list.
So it is.
Yeah.
Well, Chairman,
You know what? Then centre.
Chairman, can I amend the proposal then? Thank you, Councillor Rose Parker, to include the Welsh Road one in it as well.
It says something about it. So the Reno Road one,
That's the one. That's
no, it's saying it's subject to a lease, the cooperative.
That's over there.
The Wellhouse Road car park
Is it
is
Reno, sorry?
right. Well, the Wellhouse Road car park is there's a I can't remember if it's a 99-year lease or a 999-year lease.
Well, this is,
No, this is Reno Road.
and it says in that description that it has a 125-year lease to the car park as well
To a
as...
co-op retail
So-
space.
so-
As well as Raynor Road. So,
This is Reno
Oh,
Road.
right.
It says 48 spaces,
no,
subject to a lease to the co-op for 125 years from 1988.
That's on the bit.
So 48 spaces is Rainbow Road, but not.
I think I just looked at it and assumed
Okay,
it was
this
there.
is, we can
Yeah,
discuss this at the meeting.
include, yeah, that's
Um,
no problem.
Okay, so we do have a motion. Would anyone like to second that?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jane. Any more discussion? Okay, all those in favour please show.
Anyone who wants to be at that meeting, should just email when I've got a date.
Yes.
That is unanimous. Item 11, to consider a request to site a catering van at Letcliffe Park. Do have email correspondence about it. So,
Can I just ask the chairman what sort of catering is it? A mobile catering?
Mobile, yeah.
It is mobile. Would it be advantageous as well to have that in both Letcliffe and Victory Park? Specifically Victory Park on Sundays with football matches that goes with. We have a lot of people coming into town on Sundays with practically nothing down at Victory Park. So if it's mobile, Letcliffe and Victory Park would be ideal.
okay. The request is just for Letcliffe.
I don't think she said any.
Uh,
Look further down.
The catering van at Letcliffe Park.
I think I asked the question.
I don't think it's...
No, I didn't.
Okay, well, the request is only for Letcliffe, but if we're in the mind to allow it for Victory Park as well, we can include that and offer it to them for Sundays.
Yeah.
Well, Jodie.
What sort of food would be providing? And more sort of recyclables and things like that, what sort of trays would they use to be serving, and plastic forks and other such things?
It
Ask the question. Ask the question.
it doesn't say, but I'm sure you can email Kirsty, who's
I
the
will.
requestee.
Kirsty?
No, we can say.
We can't say it in
Oh.
GDPR.
That's what I'm
I'll email and ask her.
Okay. Well, David and then Jane.
Chairman, I think that we need to take this in steps, in stages. First of all, the Town Council needs to decide whether we want catering vans in the parks. I think currently the bylaws of the rules and regulations probably say that they can't come into the park unless we give express consent. I'm hazarding a guess here. And then I think if we're comfortable with having the catering vans in the park, we should then put it out to tender, and we should say, you know, picking up on what what Jodie was saying, can you explain, you know, your sustainability policies, if that's a bit posh for a burger van, but you know, will they be using polystyrene trays which aren't very environmentally friendly, and they're even less environmentally friendly if they're left strewn all over the park. So, you know, I think we need to put some rules around it, and I realise that's a lot more work than just saying, oh yeah, go on, we'll let a van come on. Somebody's obviously had the initiative to ask about this, but there will no doubt be 101 other catering vans who will come to us in the future and say, well, how come we let them on? You know, why didn't we have a fair do at having the trade sort of thing? And then, you know, in terms of the operation, you know, are they proposing to pay any money over to the town council for the privilege, and how much? So, my view is make a decision. You know, do we want those catering vans on? What are the circumstances that, for instance, we have an event on the park, we actually get an income from catering vans for their attendance at that event. They'll have a catering van that comes with the fair, they'll have a catering van that comes with the circus or circuses, you know, and in the money that they pay us, they'll assume they've got some exclusivity with the catering. So would our rules be, well, yes, you can come on normal match days down at Victory Park, but if we've got a different event on, or if there's a fairground or whatever, that's excluded. I think we need to think that through.
I'm more concerned about the rubbish.
I'm sorry.
I've been more concerned about the rubbish.
Well, yeah, we could have rules about, you know, they're required to remove any of the, I mean, certainly fairground comes and the park is cleaner when the fairground leaves than when they arrive. So, you know, they do a good job, but we need to make sure everybody else did the same.
Okay, thank you. Jane?
So I just read a point here about, you know, what sort of monetary benefit really would the town council get out of it. That was my point, but I take on board what David's been saying about all the other things, you know, it's how many people are going to be clambering, you know, to get them on there, so yeah.
Okay. So I think from what Councillor David Whipp said, we need to have further discussion about this.
So surely we can agree to say there's a council we do or do not want somebody on the parks, and then we can have further discussion about what that should be and how that should work.
Chairman, seconding what Mark Whittingham's just said, the sensible thing to do would be refer it to general purposes. You know, in between now and the next meeting, people can make some inquiries, you know, find out what it is. There's a further thing in terms of Victory Park, and that's the presence of the pavilion. And I do know that Warriors in the past have provided like bacon butties and the like. I'm not quite sure if they do that at the moment, but obviously there is a room there that could be used as a park cafe, and I know that there has been interest in, you know, from private businesses in actually operating that. So in Victory Park, that might be an alternative to the food van, so it gets even more complex.
Okay. Mike, are you happy to add in what Councillor Whipp suggested? Okay. So the motion is to
Do we want them all?
Agreeing
Right.
principle.
Instead of a yes or no question,
Yeah.
are you saying agreeing principle or?
In principle, would we like to have food outlets on the park?
Okay, and then in the case of yes, we would defer it to GP for further discussion
Yeah.
there. Okay, so we got a mover and a seconder. All those in favour, please show. Okay. All those against?
Against having it in principle, is that what we're against, or
Yeah.
deferring it?
Yeah, I'm not
In
sure I want
principle.
it.
Okay. So there was 2 against for having it for that motion, but that did pass. So that needs to go on the agenda for the general purposes.
So what would you like me to ask the question? Do you want me to find out if any other parks do it, and then you know what income you get
Well,
from
we
it,
can
or
discuss this after.
okay.
Okay, so item 12, skate ramp at Victory Park. To consider replacing the skate ramp that was removed due to being damaged / worn out at Victory Park. Pendleborough Council have received a quote for the replacement ramp, and this is £3,700 plus VAT. This is within the current year's budget for repairs and renewals of park equipment. Mike?
I think it's a great idea.
Okay. Kirsty?
Second.
Okay. Jane?
Just ask one thing. Is it a like for like? Is it we are replacing it with something? We haven't got any.
Yeah, exactly the same as what was there.
Oh,
And I've done some research because I thought it seemed like an awful lot of money. It's not.
it's not. No.
It's always busy. There's always people on there.
It's got a mover and a seconder to say yes. All those in favour, please show. Okay, that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 13, Pendle Leisure Trust Free Swimming Initiative 2020/2021 to consider a request from Pendle Leisure Trust to provide funding for free school holiday swimming for children who attend Barnoldswick primary schools and children who reside in Barnoldswick. The cost of this is £3,391.75. Councillor Whipp.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a bit of background on this. A few years ago, can't remember how many, well, if I go back long enough, Pendle Council used to fund free swimming for under certain age groups, but that was abolished quite a long time ago. Probably 12 years since, something like that. More recently, in 2016, the county council funded free swimming. 4 years ago, is it? And virtually all the primary schools in Pendle got that, but the funding came from Lancashire County Council. Unfortunately, following the county council elections, that funding wasn't replaced, and Pendle Leisure Trust cast about to see if they could continue the free school swimming scheme during school holidays by raising the funds from parish and town councils. And last year, Barnoldswick Town Council did agree to do it, I think at this equivalent meeting, and we funded it from the grants pot, which had sufficient money in it to do so. My suggestion, Chairman, would be that we do that again, and the unspent monies within the grants and donations, we fund this. I think it's a bit invidious if any particular area doesn't participate, because children from other schools could be coming and using the sports centre, and children from Barnoldswick or not. I think it was far better when the county council was funding it because it was across the board, nobody missed out. I think, Chairman, indirectly it's helping to fund the sports centre. When you divide the number of beneficiaries by the funding that's put in, you might say, well, that's quite a bit, but nevertheless, I think it's worth doing. I certainly got the county council to do it, however many years ago it was, and I think it's worthwhile. So I would move that we do.
It works out at £3.78 per child for the year.
That's £3.78 per child who use the facility rather than the number of children who are eligible to use it.
No.
All right, put me hand up, sorry.
Well, it's a £3.78 for a child for the full year of the children that we're going to give vouchers to.
Okay. All right.
Whether they use it or not is a
I think we need to ask the question this time about home educated children and how we can make sure that they receive it, because that was a question that came up on Facebook last time.
Chairman, I've always been perfectly clear. Any children who are home educated, if they live within Barnoldswick, are eligible for the free swimming, and all they have to do is rock up at the sports centre, the parents, and demonstrate that the children are resident in Barlick and Bob's your uncle, and they get a voucher up there.
That's second page motion.
Thank you for seconding that. So we'll take that to the vote unless anyone else wants to speak. Okay, all those in favour then please show. That is unanimous, thank you very much. Moving on to item 14, hanging basket and grass cutting contract. To consider renewal of existing contracts for hanging basket provision, planting and maintenance of soft landscaping, watering and roadside grass cutting. So the current contract is with Mark Bell.
Can you mess it down?
Oh, hanging baskets
Provision.
Chairman, as you were saying, the part of these contracts are with a local contractor that's done them for a few years, and the provision of the hanging baskets is provided by one of the local garden centres. Chairman, the Town Council has been very satisfied with the services of both providers, and the quality of the work or the goods that have been provided has been excellent, and I think people have used that word excellent previously. So what I'd like to propose is that we suspend our standing order, our financial regulations in respect of these contracts, and that we award the contracts to the current providers. There's different bits in here, but there are just two contractors, and that the contracts are awarded on the basis of the prices that they provided last year.
Okay, for people who don't understand, the standing order is that this should really go out to tender
Every now and again.
every now and again. So that's what's being suspended there.
Do we have a procurement level? And is this under it?
There's a requirement if a work provision of a service or is over £5,000, we need to go to tender. I don't think any of this work is at that level, so it's below, and but the auditor would say we should test the market periodically to see whether we're getting good value. The view of the Town Council in previous years has been, well, we're very satisfied with the quality, we're very satisfied with the value. We don't want to upset the apple cart by putting it out to tender and then ended up with a load of rubbish.
Grass cutting contract hasn't gone up in price since I started 6 years ago.
But also short local, we should be doing that, shouldn't we? That's what I mean, so it's a good reason to continue.
Okay, so
I moved it.
he's moved it. Kirsty, yeah, okay. Kirsty has seconded it. Show of hands, all those in favour? That is unanimous, thank you. Item 15 is green screening. To consider participating in a project to provide green screening at schools in Barnoldswick. So this is something that Councillor Ken Hartsley, who is not here tonight, has been sort of spearheading in his role as mayor. Unfortunately he's not here tonight. I think he's doing mayoral duties, isn't he?
He's got a meeting tonight, I think, in Cornwall.
Right. He'd be able to tell us more. Jane, do you know
I
anything?
can probably give you a little bit of background on this actually. I was researching it just before I came out, and it seems that Lambeth Council have already put this into practice. And what it really is there to do is to protect children in the playgrounds from pollutants in the air. So if you've got sort of a long section of railings alongside a playground, okay, and you've got a road, a busy road running alongside, you're getting all the toxins and the pollutants from the traffic. And what this green screening is to do is to try and put a barrier between the pollutants and the children in the playground. And it's with the sort of environmental climate change and everything going on, this is something that's becoming a little bit more prominent. And I think some schools, for example, Gisborne Road School, would lend itself quite well to it because of just with the length of roads and everything.
I think we should clarify, by a barrier, it's plants.
It's plants, it's green, it's actually green plants that will absorb this from the atmosphere.
St Joseph's pretty much, they are surrounded by a hedge. Gisborne Road, the logistics of that is a bit, because it's obviously a retaining wall on the side of the road.
I believe that they put in boxes.
Yeah.
That's what, yeah, it's not going to be something that's going to be planted in the ground as such.
Yeah.
Yeah. Councillor Pearce? Councillor Whipp?
I wasn't putting my hand up to say I'm paid for it. Chairman, Ken, the mayor, emailed some information through which don't press me on this because I only know what I'm doing to tell you now. Ken has been, as mayor, has been looking at how this could be implemented in Pendle as a whole, and he has got some interest from Burnley, Pendle and Rosendale, CVS, who are interested in doing it. There's a pot of money through the Health and Wellbeing Partnership Board, which Ken sits on, for social prescribing. Now, if I get any of this slightly wrong, I'm sorry about that. My understanding is, from the correspondence that Ken's forwarded to me, that there is a willingness for those bodies, it's clinical commissioning group money in the first instance, to fund this sort of project. just what sort of project it is, and you know how extensive it is. Is it the whole of Pendle? Is it just a bit, or is it a series of bits all put together? I really don't know. But what I've seen, I'm persuaded that there is funding available for it. Chairman, I can also report that this same issue was discussed this afternoon by Barnoldswick in Bloom, and their position is that they're willing to support the initiative, but stress that there's a limit to what they can do. So it might be limited to providing some advice rather than necessarily be hands-on. I think the concept is if it's funded by the CCG, that you know, it would involve different sections of the community helping to put the provision in place, you know, making the planters, you know, actually getting them going, anything like that, and that it may be that GPs could include this within a fitness on prescription type activity, which would, you know, get people who are perhaps overweight or you know, other ailments. I wasn't pointing the finger there. No. I couldn't possibly comment. So, yeah, so there is funding available. The means by which you'd sort of access that funding is a bit up in the air, and I'm not privy to how far the discussion has gone on that. I think, in addition to what I said, the Mayor's office has contacted two schools, Gisborne Road and St Joseph's, because there is a bit of fence at St Joseph's between the garage and the school, so that would be suitable. And it also happens that those two schools have two of the staff, either a teaching assistant or a teacher, who are quite keen on horticultural initiatives, so it's just sort of fitting together there. I would very much like the Town Council to sign up to it and say we'll support it, and then ask the question, well, you know, how is it going to happen and what involvement would you wish?
Does that answer your question?
No, that's what we asked. We don't know. We just decided to support it, really.
Yes.
I'll second David said.
You want to say that a bit?
Sorry, I'll second what David said.
You're right. Okay, so it's moved and seconded. All those in favour?
So to sign up to support it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and to ask, what do you want?
How do we do it?
Yeah.
Okay, that's unanimous, by the way.
Sorry, I did say.
Okay. Item number 16, Ribble Rivers Trust Tree Planting Initiative, that's really wordy. To consider the council taking part in the Ribble Rivers Tree Planting Initiative. Councillor Whipp, you indicated.
Thank you, Chairman. This was publicised last week in the local, online media, and I contacted the Ribble Rivers Trust to find out more details, and they have provided me with a prospectus of what they're doing. They are currently looking to get significant sponsorship from commercial interests, and they're not able to share that really, because I don't think they've got them signed up, or looking at some launch things. I really don't know. So the financial detail underlying this, I can't really speak to. But the basic concept is a 10-year programme of very significant tree planting within the wider river basin and all the hinterland, which of course most of Barnoldswick feeds into the Ribble. And in the first years they'll be dependent on getting money from sponsors, getting money from local councils and other organisations. And I can mention that this afternoon Barnoldswick in Bloom agreed to grant £1,000 towards the project. And over that 10-year period, there would be, you know, hundreds of thousands, millions of trees planted within the catchment of the Ribble. That would help mitigate against the climate crisis by carbon capture. It would help alleviate flooding by natural flood management measures, and it would help increase river cleanliness by less nitrogen getting into the rivers and killing off the wildlife. So it's a great good do, as you might say. I mean, I would very much like Barnoldswick Town Council to play a positive role in this. You yourself, Chairman, have been extolling the virtues of tree planting, and I think, you know, we could fit hand in glove with this initiative. Perhaps not for this tree planting session, but certainly for tree planting sessions in the future. So, I mean, subject to what people said tonight, I think the Town Council needs to ask more questions and say to Ribble Rivers Trust, how can we as a Town Council get involved? I think we perhaps ought to be prepared to put his hand in his pocket and put some money into it when we know more about it next year. And ultimately we ought to be open to have some of the trees that have been planted as part of the initiative on some of the land that we now own as owners of the parks, or land that might come into our ownership due to further community asset transfers in the near future. So that's my lot, Chairman.
Thank you. Jane?
Okay, so that was my question really, on how will we be involved with that. I did look on the map just to see where the Ribble meandered, and it sort of goes north of Gisborne, and I didn't know how we'd come into play with that, if they're going to be planting it alongside of the Ribble. But if there's...
Chairman, the catchment of the Ribble, as far as we're concerned, it begins at the brow of the road as you go up towards West Craven High School. So I'm looking through the wall, up Kelbrook Road, and it rises up, where you go over that little brow there and then start to drop down, that's the watershed. That's the watershed between the land that drains into the Irish Sea, or the land that drains into the North Sea via the Aire. And then, so Barnoldswick literally sits on that watershed. So the catchment of the Ribble is in Barnoldswick, and part of the catchment of the Aire is in Barnoldswick as well.
Yeah, okay.
So they're not planting alongside the Ribble, just, yeah, they are planting alongside becks and
I
things.
wasn't aware of the beck planting, it was just, I thought it was Ribble.
There's huge, you know, hundreds of acres of upland that may be planted. It's the whole catchment, which includes us.
Okay, that's fine.
Does it include roots as well?
Yeah.
This phase of roots.
Okay, so we've got a mover. Jane, were you seconding that?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Yeah, okay. All those in favour then? That's unanimous, thank you.
What were you favour at, sorry?
Providing out support
Yes,
and
yes.
just finding out, how that support could come into the law.
Yeah. I just didn't get it, but
Okay, item 17 then, heritage project, Leckcliffe Park and area adjacent to Park on Manchester Road. To consider a heritage project covering Leckcliffe Park and the adjacent area on Manchester Road.
I was going to say which area.
Do we have a cost?
Let David explain this.
Well, Chairman, I mean, this sort of wraps 2 or 3 issues up in a bundle. And first of all, Leckcliffe Park itself. The Town Council took ownership of the park last year, was it? The year before? And the Town Council has an aspiration to maintain the park at a higher standard than it has enjoyed for the last few years. And one of the things that we've done is get the sculptures into the park so that there's more reason why people visit it and it will become busier. One of the things that is a downside of the park is the accumulated neglect over a period of decades, where there's quite a lot of the historic features that have become covered in ivy and overgrowth, or undergrowth, whichever way you say it. And the historical significance of the park isn't obvious to everybody. So several of us have been up in the park during the installation of the sculptures and leading up to that. And we've discussed the park with a lot of park users. And I could stand up there all day and wax lyrical about the borehole cause, or I could bore all day about the borehole cause. And there's, Tom and I have been counting up how many fragments of borehole there are up there. And I can see people get mystified. But you don't want me to tell you the story now.
I can tell you.
Not in this discussion, please.
Anyone want to walk up there?
I
I'll
want to
explain
go
it.
home tonight.
So the history of the park isn't something that's self-evident, and a lot of people who use the park on a daily basis don't have a clue what it's all about. So the heritage is not in danger of being lost, where it's not evident, and so we can do a lot with that. Also, and we've discussed about this in an earlier item from the General Purposes Committee about the standard of maintenance. Some of the paths are very slippery. We could do with some short-term measures to make them less slippery, but ultimately we've got that set paved path that runs up from the bottom entrance up to the top of the park, which is generally overgrown in summer, probably impassable because of that, and during the winter I would go down it because you'd slip, you'd go head over heels because it's so slippery. So there's lots of little things that you could pull together, both to make the park better and improve people's understanding of the park. An issue related to the park, Tiana Adams, who was a councillor in the last council, one of her ambitions was to achieve better pedestrian access to the park. Currently, if you want to get to the park on foot, unless you come up King Hill, or perhaps come along from Hodge Lane, you have to brave a narrow section of Manchester Road where there isn't a footpath. And Tiana's ambition was to try and have a footpath that ran along the field side of the hedge going up Manchester Road from where there is a pavement, and then to be able to access the park by a swift crossing of Manchester Road rather than trying to hide behind the bushes as traffic whiz past you at 40 miles an hour or at speed people come down. And then the final thing, and coming to the question that Mike asked, was about what bit of land adjacent to the park. And this is an area called Poor Bones. And Poor Bones was where people who were in the workhouse some time ago used to be sent to break stone for the highways. So before the highways were all tarmac and you know, as they are, well, I was going to say as they are now, but to be honest, some of them are getting as bad as they were. But part of the maintenance is that people who were getting assistance, poor assistance, were required to work on projects like breaking stone that was then used to fill potholes. And I know we're not getting those times again. But that little area called Poor Bones has been forgotten and neglected for generations now. Still there, still has a wall around it, but it's isolated on a nasty bit of road that you don't really want to walk up to. So my head was thinking about Letcliffe Park. Tiana has been asking for this pavement improvement, and I wondered whether we could link it all together to get a footpath running on the field side of the hedge up Manchester Road, which would access Poor Bones. Incidentally, is a lovely viewpoint if you go in there and look out over the town, but also access Letcliffe Park, and then the project would encompass celebrating the heritage and history of the park and the part that the park has played in the life of Barnoldswick for well over a century now. If you go back to 1890 since it came into being. So, Chairman, having done a very cursory look on Kirsty's advice at what might be available, there are programmes within the Heritage Lottery Fund which may assist us in doing a super duper job. And in the first instance, I think what we ought to be doing is just sort of work up the idea a little bit and then ask if we can discuss it with someone from the Heritage Lottery Fund to see if they think it's a runner and take their advice as how we might take the project forward. I think as a town council, if we're serious about making major improvements to our parks, we need to attract external funding, and I think in terms of Letcliffe Park and poor old Poor Bones, this might be an opportunity for us to do so. It might all come to nothing, but I think it's worth putting some work into it.
Okay, Councillor Rose Parker.
I just wanted to say that at the moment the Heritage Lottery Fund has nature as a priority in the north, so it's also a really good timing to start approaching them about parks. So I just wanted to add that point. It makes sense to do it now.
Okay, Councillor Mills.
I just really second what David's saying there. When you do go to Letcliffe Park, it's a bit like the bad relation, isn't it? You know, most of the funding sort of works putting round about town, and it would be lovely to see much of a vast improvement up there to rediscover this heritage that we've got, and you know, I think it would be a really good thing to move forward with.
Okay, so do you have a motion?
Well, my proposal is that proposals on paper, so that we work it up a little bit from the sort of sketch that I've just outlined, and we invite, or we request, we ask somebody from the Heritage Lottery Fund, an advisor, to meet with us to discuss whether the project's got legs, and whether we should go to a formal bid for funding. I mean, depending on what threshold we go for, the next stage could be an expression of interest. So, you work it up to the next level, and then they say yay or nay, and then you do a formal bid. I mean, depending on the level of funding that we want to go for, you can get some grant aid towards working up your final proposals, but that's when you get into the multi-million pounds, and I suspect we're probably not going to get into that bucket.
Okay, thank you. So Kirsty, are you seconding that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All those in favour then? That's unanimous, thank you. Last page then.
Are you taking this one?
Item 18, Victory Park. To consider management of the undrained area adjacent to the rugby pitch, Victory Park, and other options to diversify planting in the park. So the reason for this item is because we were approached by a botanist who had a look around Victory Park and was looking for ways that we could diversify the biosphere sort of in the park. And there was three main suggestions, and one of the main ones was making a wet area near the rugby pitch where it's already boggy, and it would be introducing plants that are what's the word, proper for that area.
Boggle.
Boggle. Wetter than other ones. Yeah. So I think really what the motion should be is that we agree to this botanist to provide us with what we should be planting up, and to advise us in that way, and then for us to implement a scheme, really.
The botanist, you mean he's going to offer suggestions as to what we should be doing?
That's very presumptuous of you. The botanist is actually a female. So you caught out there, but I won't hold it against you.
I'll rephrase that, Chairman. They will provide suggestions rather than actually doing anything in the first instance.
Okay. David?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, this was your suggestion in the first place about trying to move Victory Park away from being a green desert. Yeah, those acres of green grass provide very little benefit for wildlife, and it's quite an alien environment for a lot of creatures. So, diversifying the flora and the fauna is very valuable in terms of sustaining wildlife, making sure we've got pollinators in the future, all that. And I think the botanist in question, as well as the bog, was also looking at the banking on the far side of the rugby pitch area. So there's a slope where the drumlin was excavated to make a level playing field, and she thinks that there is some value in encouraging the diversity on that banking, and then the chairman has been pushing for more appropriate tree planting of an appropriate nature, and finally there's a suggestion that we could increase the diversity along the bank of stock back, so that you know, there was a bit more than green grass. Chairman, the Bloom Group has discussed this and are supportive of the initiative. I think the Bloom Group are expecting the Town Council to take a lead, you know, in agreeing what sort of work might be done, and the botanist is willing to come and visit and have a site visit to discuss her proposals in greater detail, so we've got an idea of exactly what the implications would be.
Kirsty.
Can I just ask if there's a way that it could be explained or communicated to people in the park, if we could think about that longer term? So if we're making these changes, is there a way we could say this is to try and increase wildlife or something, so people understand why the changes are happening? Or we're hoping by doing this we're going to get more hedgehogs or whatever it might be, you know, so actually people can see as they walk around. Can we think about how we do that? It might be too expensive, but can we think about it?
I think that's for later on when we agree what we're actually going to do, right? We think about what we're going to do first and figure that out. I agree with you, but I just think it's for...
I thought we were approving them to go ahead.
I think the initial step, Chairman, is meet with, I'm going to say a name, I'm frightened to do so now, because Chairman of GDPR me, Alison Plackett, I mean, the botanist, and, you know, find out, you know, just what it involves, and then if we can do that before the next GP meeting, we can have a discussion about, you know, actually it's this, this and this. Some of it might take some time to implement, and other things we might be able to do straight away. But it, you know, it's general. I think we should agree the general principle of increasing the diversity in the park, and you know, without necessarily affecting other users. I don't think anybody's suggesting we plough up the football pitches. Well, actually, that might be a good idea. Oh. Yeah, nobody's suggesting ploughing up the football pitches. It's the periphery, the perimeters and things like that. The one, Chair, the one issue that there is we need to have in mind that we had designated the bog area as part of the dog exercise area, and the intention was to fence it off so that there was an area that dogs could be exercised without being on a lead, as we have at Letcliffe Park. If, as part of that, the Town Council had said it had looked at improving the drainage so that it was actually a usable area, that everybody was coming to us and saying that the Golden Labrador ended up with chocolate Labrador. So we need to, you know, sort of bear that in mind in developing any schemes. And it may be that if, when we do fence off an area for dogs to be exercised, that we exclude the boggy area, because no point creating bog plants and then draining it, and there aren't any bogs for the plants to grow on.
Okay. So, all those in favour? Unanimous. Item 19, Butts Clinic.
This one, Butts Clinic.
Can I just say, can I just back out, just for the record, it's absolutely freezing here. Just to let you know.
It is actually, yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I'm sorry, Chairman, but in all the setting up before the meeting, I didn't go down and put the heating on for another 2 hours.
Could have closed the door, I suppose, as well.
You know.
My nose is
Yeah. I'm not going to put it on now because it's too late.
That's me.
Yeah, come on, there's 2 items left, and one of them we don't even have discussion. Yeah. Okay, Butts Clinic. To consider a response to the temporary closure of Butts Clinic and the decision to move services to Colne Health Centre for a minimum of 4 weeks.
I was hoping I didn't have to lead on this, subject.
Well, do you want me to?
Yes.
Go on. So we found out in a Lancashire Telegraph article, I think it was, that Butts Clinic had been closed because of a leak in the roof, and it made the building unfit. It was a bit confusing because the article in question had this building pictured at the top of the article. So, but most of the clinical services have been relocated to this building. The ones that weren't relocated here have been moved to Colne. And I mean, that's the position we're in, really. Kirsty?
Aren't some of them there?
Yeah.
Some of them are still operating
That's
from
what I
there.
read, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
some of them are still there.
Generally, the midwives are
Yeah.
still there.
Okay. Mike?
Can I just ask, I have seen quite a lot over Butts Clinic recently. What is the state of that building? I've never been in, so it's... I
Practically derelict.
Oh.
It's not
what-
that bad.
And what are the plans? Right, and what's
It
the
needs
plans
knocking
to-
down and rebuilding. Which, yeah, we need a new health centre for Barnoldswick, really. It's not a suitable building for what it should be used for. I mean, that almost came to pass, not really. We almost had,
We almost had a-
yeah, no.
Do we have any plans for Butts Clinic in the respect of making it functional, usable, fit for purpose?
It's not our place to say, really. It's the CCG's or whoever owns that particular building. Well, it's NHS estates, okay. Councillor Whipp?
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem, Chairman, is that the NHS is split into all these little bits, and the Clinical Commissioning Group, which is a body that commissions work, pays for people to do things, don't have any capital, they don't have any buildings, they pay other parts of the NHS to, or increasingly not the NHS, to provide the service. As somebody said over there, the Butts Clinic itself is owned by NHS Estates, which is one of umpteen companies that make it all up. There are probably, or there were, 4 or maybe 5 service providers that provide different clinics at Butts Clinic, or used to provide different clinics. The eye clinic is up here. When the treatment room moved out of the surgery, that came in here. There are another 2 clinics that come in here now. Podiatry was at Butts, and they're going to Colne. So people with foot problems have got to walk all the way to Colne to get... Sorry. Well, the diabetic eye clinic is no, it's in here. Some of it, yeah. Bits of it here. So it's a mess, and you can't get hold of it and sort of talk to anybody sensible. We've campaigned, you know, as a town council, as individuals, as councillors on Pendle Council and the County Council. We've campaigned for a new health centre. We were encouraged last year when the Clinical Commissioning Group, who don't have any capital to invest in buildings, but you know, they can sort of chivvy away at the people, they commissioned a feasibility study into a health centre, but the feasibility, well, if there was a report, we never saw it, and effectively it was because the GP surgery couldn't see how they would make it stack up. Their problems are more about a lack of GPs. There aren't enough GPs, and they can't recruit GPs. So they're more concerned about that than the state of their building, which is it's okay, but it's pretty inaccessible to anybody with mobility handicaps. So there's a big mess, and the sensible thing, as far as we could see, was have a new health centre which would provide all the services that we should be providing in Barnoldswick, and combine the GP surgery with the providers, the clinics that either have been or are currently at Bucks Clinic. And then out of the blue, lo and behold, this building that's been, it's a lovely building inside, but it's well past its sell-by date, and it has a rotten asbestos roof. And lo and behold, over Christmas, there's a leak in the roof, and part of the building is full of water. So, you know, what the NHS are going to do about it, who knows? Are they going to put a new roof on a building that's clapped out? Are they going to say, okay, we accept that we need to create a new building? Will that building include GPs? You know, it's awful. From Pendle Council's area committee, we've called for a meeting with the CCG. I mean, I would suggest that the Town Council, you know, 2 courses of action. We express our concern at the abrupt termination of Barnoldswick-based services at Bucks Clinic, you know, as a consequence of the condition of the building. And secondly, we ask to be included with the Pendle Council in any meetings that there are with the CCG to discuss the future of healthcare provision in Barnoldswick. I say meetings with the CCG because they're the only people you can get hold of. You know, the rest of them, they're miles away, or they're up in the ivory towers, and you know, there's no discussion to be had. So that's my suggestion.
Councillor Rose Parker, did you indicate?
No.
No.
Sorry. Go on.
Margaret.
Thanks, Chairman. We did meet with them last year, and we were supposed to meet with them again in June last year, but nothing came of that, did it? But the clinic, podiatry, is the only one that was down there, and you couldn't get in. I had to go to, what they call it, yard spinners, when I had bad chilblains on my toes. And I know Ken had to go down there and his feet were bandaged up. We mentioned all that when we saw them. And like Emma, with the diabetic eye clinic, you've got to go to Colne now, because they don't do it at Butts anymore. They stopped doing it from last year. I think you went to Colne, didn't you? Yeah, I had to go to Colne as well. So it's all the travelling around that we do need something. So we don't just need it for us, we need it for the people in nearby as well, don't we? West Craven completely, really, you know, so, but they're just not bothered with us at the moment. But we do need something, do we? Definitely.
Are you seconding?
Yeah, I'll second what David said, definitely.
Express concern at cancellation of clinics at Bucks and ask Pendle Borough Council to be included in the meetings with CCG at Bucks. Yeah?
Yep.
What you said?
Okay. All those in favour?
Excellent.
It's unanimous. Thank you very much. That concludes all the discussion items. Finally, on the agenda tonight, we have items for correspondence information only.
We've been asked if we want to join a rural market towns group of rural services network. The man rang me, so
Is there a cost?
yes. It was. What's our population? Between 5 and 10?
Of 10.
£150 per year.
Yeah.
Yeah. He rings this out there.
You want to read it out?
No, that's fine.
Is there any more correspondence?
No, that's it.
So I'll thank everybody for coming tonight. I wish you all a safe journey home. I will ask